Hey, good morning, Elevate. How you doing? It's good to be back with y'all. Don't know if you caught it this morning, but Pastor Mac has made it back. Brought a good word at 10 o'clock. It was great to see him. He's looking better every day, so y'all continue to keep him in your prayers. He's a walking miracle, but it was so great to see him this morning, and so great to see him bring the message and get to hear him. And God is great, isn't he? To bring him through what he's brought him through, and he's looking better than ever, looking healthy. So y'all keep him in your prayers. Continue to keep Dylan in your prayers. He's finally home from the hospital. He's been through a lot, but he's home now. What's that? I can't hear you, honey.
Hope.
Hope. Yeah, Hope too. Yeah, she's saying Hope. I thought she was saying home. But Hope too. Hope's home. She's doing good. So y'all keep them two in your prayers. Can't wait to see both of them. Especially Hopi. I miss Hopi. I miss her smile. But anyway, today I want to talk to y'all a little bit about, school is coming up for some of you guys. And it'll be here before too long, and I know some of you may not get to go to school just yet, and some of you may, but school's getting ready to come back up. And I got a couple questions for you. Who is considered important in your school? And who is considered the least in your school? And by this, I mean categories or groups of people. I don't necessarily so much mean individuals, but who's considered important in your school? To me, I would think teachers are important. Probably the most underpaid profession we have in America is teachers. Now, some of you kids may not think that, but, what about athletes? Are they considered important? At some schools they are. Some schools maybe not so much. Well, what about the least? In most schools, guys, there's a hierarchy of who's important and who's not, who's popular and who's not, who's in and who's out. And it doesn't matter, the qualities that make somebody important or popular or in, it changes from school to school. I can remember when I was in high school, I changed high schools my freshman year, between my freshman and sophomore years, and the one high school I attended, how much money you had was more important than anything else when it come to how popular you were. And then at the other high school, it was more about how good you was in sports. So two different categories of people, but the hierarchy was completely different. But, there's always somebody at the top of the social ladder, and there's always somebody at the bottom. And that's no different than in school. A lot of you may find yourself in the middle, somewhere in between the top and the bottom. You're probably just trying to hang on to your spot in that hierarchy, or maybe you're trying to inch your way to the top. Or maybe, you're savvy enough and smart enough to say to yourself, well, if I spend too much time with these people at the bottom, then maybe I'll lose my spot. And, people may think about that and say, well, that's kind of strange and crazy, but it's really not. It's the same way with adults. It was the same way in Jesus' time. There was hierarchies of who was important, who was great, and who was the least. And it's funny because, we look at it and we kind of think, well, that's kind of crazy. Well, no, not really, because the disciples, the very closest followers of Jesus, was bucking, trying to argue amongst themselves who was the greatest, who had the most important status in Jesus' kingdom amongst the disciples. They would walk down the road and argue about it. So it's not uncommon for teenagers to feel the same way. I mean, if the disciples who was walking with Jesus was arguing amongst themselves about their status and who was important and who wasn't amongst the 12, what do you think it does with kids today? It's not changed. But you know, Jesus was a little bit different in the fact that he challenged the disciples. You know, they asked him, well, who was the greatest? Well, he challenged the way they thought about social standing, about what scale they used to measure each other. And if you go to Matthew chapter 19 and in Mark chapter 9, you see examples of this. And I want to read in Matthew 19, verse 13 through 15 for you. It says, then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked them. Jesus then said, let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these. When he had placed his hands on them and blessed them, he went on his way from there. So here you have the disciples trying to determine who was more important. If you go to the beginning of that chapter, you know, Jesus is talking about some very important things with adults and parents. He's talking about marriage. He's talking about divorce. He's talking about infidelity. He's talking about abstinence and those sorts of things. And then all of a sudden you have these little children come up. And the disciples thought, well, these little children aren't important enough. We're talking about adult things. And Jesus is like, no, wait a minute. Bring the little children, let them come to me. For the kingdom of heaven belongs to those such as them. Now, think about that. Why did Jesus use children to illustrate his point to his disciples? What was the purpose of that? You know, it's kind of funny because even during that time, children was thought of as less important. They're less important. You know, Jesus is busy ministering to the adults. And the disciples thought, well, they're less important, so they need to scurry along and not bother him. Well, think about that. That's crazy, you know. Think of someone in your group that you try to avoid because being around them may change the way other people see you. Think about that. Do you think Jesus would challenge you about that? I think so. He challenged his disciples when it comes to the children. If you go to Mark chapter 9, verse 33 through 37, listen to this. They come to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, what were you arguing about on the road? This is where the disciples was arguing, well, who amongst us is the greatest in Jesus' kingdom? But they kept quiet because on the way they had argued about who was the greatest. So you have to give the disciples a little bit of credit here in the sense that they kept quiet because they knew what they was doing was wrong. So some of the things Jesus was teaching the disciples was kind of sticking to them and getting in their heart. But not everything, because they were still arguing about who was the greatest. So sitting down, Jesus called the 12, the disciples, and said, anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. And it's important to note here, sitting down, when rabbis taught their students, they would sit down, and that would make their students understand back in Jesus' time that they're getting ready to teach them valuable things. So they would sit down when they started to teach. So the disciples knew he was getting ready to teach them something. So here, Jesus took a little child whom he placed among them. Taking the child in his arms, he said to them, whoever welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me does not welcome me, but the one who sent me. Think about that. Jesus is telling the disciples that everybody matters. He's telling them down to the smallest child. And we need to take that to heart, especially with what's going on today in our world. A lot of division, a lot of anger, a lot of strife, a lot of those things. we need to take that to heart. Everybody's important. Everybody has a purpose. Everybody needs to feel that want. So, it reminds me of a story that I read not too long ago. And it kind of touched me a little bit because, I could imagine this happening and seeing it happen. There's a little boy in middle school, and his mom was worried about him all the time because he struggled to make friends. He wasn't popular. He wasn't in any sort of group where he was wanted or welcomed. So every day he would go into lunch. He was in middle school, 7th grade, I think, which is a tough time. Lord help our middle schoolers. But he would go eat lunch by himself every day. And then one day, the local college football team sent some players over to the school to eat lunch and to intermingle with these kids. And lo and behold, here sat this little boy all by himself at a table, no friends around him, nobody. And the star player from the football team happened to go over there and sit down and ask the little boy if he could join him. So when the players sit down and he was recognized, everybody knew who he was. He was the best player on the team, widely known in the whole country. But he sat down at this table with this little boy, and immediately this little boy starts talking to him, tells him his name, tells him what he likes, he knows him as a player, and he just opens up and starts talking to him about everything. And somebody took a picture of it and sent it to the little boy's mother. And the little boy's mother was so thankful that somebody would take the time, somebody important or famous took the time to sit with her son. So she wrote the college and the coach and everything and told him that she was so thankful for that and that player showed the humility that God expects us to show by being the most popular person spending time with the least popular person in the school. So that little kid became a hero for a few days in his school because he got to sit with the most popular player. But the question I have for you guys is this. Why is it so hard to make choices like that football player made and go over there and sit down with that kid? What do you have to give up in order to do things like that? How does that football player's actions and his humility, how does that teach us what God wants us to know about putting others first, the least first? So who's first? Is it you? Sadly, in our country, that seems to be what it is. When we learn to put others before us, and we respect others for their differences, and we accept those things, and we love them as Jesus loves us, then this country is going to be a lot better place. Your school is going to be a lot better place. What do you have to give up to spend time with those who are ignored? What would it personally look like for you to welcome the least? Each of us make judgments every day, guys. Whether we realize it or not, all of us do, adults included. How valuable are the people around us? We decide their worth to us. And we do, adults included. We show how much we value those people around us by how much time, energy, and attention we're willing to invest in them. Are you willing to be different at your school and step out and be that example to other people? Because somebody in your school is hurting. Some kid needs to understand and know and feel that people out there do love them and that they are important. So I want to challenge you guys when you go back to school, whenever that may be, I want to challenge you guys to be like that football player, and I want to challenge y'all to step out. Step out of your comfort zone and go interact with those that are outcast, that may be low on that social scale that we have in school. And to be an example for others. I want to challenge you guys to be like that football player, because you never know whose life you can impact by simply being kind to them. So please take that to heart. Who is first? What does Jesus say about the least? And he used these little kids as examples because they are important. And I'll leave you guys with this. It said in Matthew chapter 19, if you go back and read it, it says, then the people brought the little children to Jesus. Parents, we're responsible for bringing our children to Jesus. He commands us to bring our children to Jesus. So I want to encourage each one of you parents who's struggling with your child, don't give up, because Jesus is expecting them to come. And he's expecting you to bring them. And that's a whole nother sermon. But I want to challenge you parents. Bring your kid to church when we start back. If we're not able to attend like we are right now, make them sit down and watch the service. Watch Pastor Mac. They need to hear from their senior pastor. They need to hear from Pastor Van and the Army and the pastors. They need to hear from them. So, the people brought little children to Jesus. The people there was the parents. So parents, I challenge you, step out. So, with that said, I'm going to leave it there on that. Sunday at 4 o'clock, next Sunday, we had to challenge the Chopped Challenge finals because one or two of the participants couldn't do it that Sunday. They had other obligations that they had to attend to. But next Sunday, 4 p.m., we're going to have the Chopped Challenge finals. And I'm looking forward to it because they're using beef. Is it beef? Or chicken or what? What are they using? Beef? My kind of thing, because you know I don't like chicken. So tune in. We're going to have the Chopped Challenge final, and I'm excited. Excited to see what they bring. So with all that, guys, I love you. I miss you. I hope to see you soon. God bless you. Bye-bye.